Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti, and today we're going over the best and worst in wrestling in 2018 from WWE, All Elite Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and more. So we'll go back and forth on what we think is the best, then we'll go on what's the worst, and then we'll go to our fans on our Twitter page at SCPB Podcast using the hashtag Wrestling with Twitter. And if you want to fast forward to any parts, we got the timestamps below in the description. So, Ralph, I will start with the best. What I think was one of the best moments of 2018, and it was one that I don't think anybody ever thought was going to happen. It happened on an episode of SmackDown. We heard the news that Daniel Bryan was medically cleared by the WWE doctors. He comes out to open the show and cuts an amazing emotional promo where he returns to in-ring competition. And on that same night, we have Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens attack him, and he's taking serious bumps. He takes the apron powerbomb from Kevin Owens. He's doing drop kicks. It was just a great moment just seeing Daniel Bryan back in the ring. Now, I will say that from that moment on, it hasn't been the best year for Daniel Bryan, but just knowing that moment, and I know a lot of wrestling fans probably were teary-eyed watching that promo.
Yeah, it was certainly a great moment to see him back. I mean, especially somebody who you kind of felt like had unfinished business because of the whole yes movement. He didn't actually lose the title. He had to drop the title. All of that stuff. So really, this gave him the opportunity to kind of right all of those wrongs. And there was a little bit of up and down there. I think his feud with The Miz kind of left a lot to be desired. They could have done that a little bit better. But I will say this right now, as a heel, I think he's one of the most unique heels that we've seen in quite some time. And I think he's actually doing a really good job. And I think he'll be one of the more compelling characters going through 2019.
Without a doubt. And I do like I guess he's trying to channel his inner Kurt Cobain with his out-of-ring attire.
Yeah.
With the cardigans and obviously with his facial hair and his hair already kind of that like hobo look to him, and this whole very liberal, very veganism and pushing that anti-consumerism down. And I connect with them because it makes so much sense with him and how his personality is. It's just driven up to 11, and that's what the great characters in wrestling are.
Yeah.
They're their personal selves that just get cranked up and exaggerated to a point that it's entertaining. So it's definitely a great moment with Daniel Bryan now as a heel, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Right.
And I do like what they're doing with Mustafa Ali, and I'm going to go back to the whole cruiserweight things later on in the show, but this is just It's great right now with Daniel Bryan as a heel. So, Ralph, what is your first best moment of 2018?
So, best and maybe even most important, based on what's going on in the industry, I want to talk a little bit about the women's division. Because a lot of people probably didn't see this coming. We knew that they were going to be pushing the women's division. And not only did they push the women's division, but everybody that was able to perform throughout all of the pay-per-views really stepped up their game and was able to deliver on a big level. So when you talk about the women's division, you got to talk a little bit about Ronda Rousey, who I'll talk about. So her coming over with really no experience in wrestling prior to her debuting at WrestleMania, having one of the better matches on the card. Actually, a lot of people consider that the best match of WrestleMania 34. I thought it was great. It was the most compelling. The crowd was into it. You could tell that she had been training and worked hard to get where she needed to be, where she looked good in the ring. You talk a little bit about Evolution, so the first all-women's pay-per-view, which not only knocked it out of the park, but many consider it to be one of the better pay-per-views of the year. I certainly consider it to be one of the better pay-per-views. That's really where we saw the whole feud with Charlotte and Becky Lynch kind of take off from there. You know, they did a little bit before that, but that's where it started to pick up and kind of build traction to what we have today with between, obviously Becky, Charlotte, Ronda, and now you've got Asuka kind of incorporated in that. So all of these storylines going forward are meaningful. It's compelling. People care about it. People are emotionally vested in it. Becky Lynch, as we talked about earlier, I don't think anybody really saw her the way her character kind of is and her persona and her popularity. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. But it's just what WWE needs right now. So having her kind of carry the torch for the women's division right now, she's very popular. And then, just as far as the most recent TLC match, great match. One of the better matches we've seen on a WWE pay-per-view in quite some time. So that would be my main thing, just the women's division. I think that all of them being able to pick up the ball and run with it, all of them doing a really great job, from Charlotte to Asuka, Becky Lynch, everybody playing their roles. So.
Right. And I actually had the women's division in the Evolution up in my list of best moments of 2018 as well. But to pinpoint one specific moment that was one of the best in 2018, and that is definitely the Go Home to Survivor Series Raw, where Becky Lynch invades, attacks Ronda Rousey from the back, goes after everybody, breaks her nose, gets concussed by Nia Jax, and she's out there bloody mess. And that really catapulted the popularity of Becky Lynch, where everybody just clicked with her. And they already were behind her as it is, but that moment right there really solidified her as possibly the face of the company right now. And if this is where WWE needs to take the ball and run with it, and I think they are. They make the TLC match the main event of the pay-per-view, which it definitely should have been. Now, there was the false start announcement of Asuka versus Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble. Is that going to be still a match? I don't know. But people want Becky Lynch in that Royal Rumble. If she's in that Royal Rumble with Charlotte Flair, that's got a main event Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Then you have Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch possibly main eventing WrestleMania 35, the first ever women's main event in WWE history. And it all culminates from that moment at Royal Rumble when Ronda Rousey comes out, points at the WrestleMania sign, and tells everybody that she's here.
Yeah.
And she has dominated in the women's division. Some people think she's getting too much of a push too early.
No way.
I disagree.
No way.
She's selling. Every match that she's in has met or exceeded expectations.
Absolutely.
She had a good match with Nikki Bella. She had a good match with Nia Jax.
She had 2 good matches with Nia Jax. And that's another thing that's on my list, actually, was Ronda Rousey debuting, and not only debuting, but being an essential part of, both shows. She's in storylines on Raw and SmackDown. And every now and then you're going to get people who boo her and everything else, and she almost kind of has that Roman Reigns effect where it's like, okay, people are going to boo her because they feel like it's the cool thing to boo her. I don't understand where that comes from, because yes, she's the women's champion, but she kind of deserves to be, because one, she's extremely popular, right? So they need to put the belt on somebody who's going to get people to watch the show. And two, like we just talked about, she performs every single time she goes out there in the ring, whether it's Nia Jax, whether it's Becky Lynch, whether it's Charlotte. We know that we can expect a good match from Ronda Rousey. So time and time again, she continues to perform. She headlined Evolution against Nikki Bella. Cut one of the better promos of the year. It was probably one of the more YouTube segments from Monday Night Raw, with her whole kind of pipe bomb, and that's where she kind of really started taking into her own as far as interviews and segments are concerned. So I don't necessarily understand the hate for Ronda Rousey, but I know that she's been an essential part of the best parts of 2018.
Now let's break away from WWE for a little bit. And my second best moment of 2018 has to be All In.
Yep.
The fact that an independent wrestling show sold out 10,000 seats in minutes, and they still put on a very good show. Now, a lot of people were worried. What were the Bucks and Cody going to do? Were there going to be problems? Was the production value going to be there? Was the show going to even be that good? And they did a great job building matches through Being the Elite's YouTube channel. They did a really good job with the show. They had an iconic moment with Cody Rhodes winning the NWA Heavyweight Championship, the first father-son duo to do it. And I thought we had 2 of the best matches of the year on that show, and that is Pentagon versus Cody Omega and Marty Scurll versus Kazuchika Okada. Two of the best matches of the year.
Yeah.
By far.
Two very good matches, and also don't forget, you had the appearance by Jericho, which nobody really thought was going to be happening. The one thing I'll point out about that show is it was different than WWE, and that was the most important thing. You didn't want it to feel like it was a WWE pay-per-view, and that's the one thing I kept saying to myself, this is different, this is different. You look at what they did with Joey Ryan and Hangman Page in the boots. That's not something you're going to see on WWE television with the inflatable penises coming out and Joey Ryan essentially doing the spot where he flips him over with his penis. Regardless of it. It was very well put together. All of the matches delivered. It almost went over on time and they had to cut it short. But other than that, I mean, it was lights out. It was probably one of the better pay-per-views of the year. It's right up there with Evolution, I think, as the best wrestling pay-per-view of the year.
Yeah, without a doubt. Some people would obviously put that in the top 3 of best pay-per-views. Evolution's got to be talked about in that regard. If you watch Impact Wrestling, their Slammiversary, a lot of people like that as the best pay-per-view of the year. Dominion for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But this is definitely, if it wasn't for this show, we don't even talk about the rumored All Elite Wrestling. We don't talk about what the Young Bucks and Cody are doing because chances are they're going to end up in WWE. We don't talk about guys like Pentagon and Rey Fenix and Bandito, who's now signed with Ring of Honor and is like the most sought after free agent at the time. We're not talking about Chris Jericho and what he's doing in the big moment where he dresses up like Pentagon, or Flip Gordon, or Joey Ryan, or Hangman Page. Like, there's a lot of names that were talked about now because of this one show.
This is giving other wrestlers outside the WWE a platform to really showcase their abilities and not go to the WWE and have to get buried because we've talked about how deep their roster is. Being able to go somewhere else outside the WWE, knowing that there's an alternative now. That's something that we haven't necessarily had since WCW. You've had Impact Wrestling, you've had Ring of Honor, who's been there. Now with New Japan and some of these guys becoming more and more popular, there really is this alternative wrestling where people can go and kind of highlight their abilities, which is great.
All right, let's move on to your number 2 moment.
Number 2, definitely got to go with overall just NXT. Lights out year for NXT, consistently delivered on every single takeover. I was actually at the takeover in New York. That was by far my favorite pay-per-view I've ever been to, and I've been to 2 WrestleManias. I've been to Raws. I've been to SummerSlam multiple times, and this was great. I mean, the atmosphere, the crowd, the way that people are just invested in everything, some of the matches they've had, some of the feuds. I mean, Johnny Gargano and Tomasso Ciampa, going back, I had to look this up. Ciampa actually turned on Gargano May 20th of 2017. That storyline is still relevant today, and it doesn't feel stale. So that speaks to not only their ability to kind of make sure that they're writing things and having matches make sense so that it's kind of progressing the storylines and make it still feel fresh, but they've been able to build new stars and include people like the Aleister Black incident where he hurt his shoulder. Rather than just kind of throw him off TV, they work that into their writing. And that's one of the things that I think NXT does really good is they pay attention to the minor details where Raw doesn't necessarily do that. SmackDown is better at it and more times than not, but NXT really drives home, makes it a point to pay attention to all the small details. Everything has its place. Every character, everybody's in touch with the character they're playing and the role they're playing. You had some epic matches. So you had the 3 matchups between Ciampa and Gargano. You had Dream and Gargano. I mean, it's an endless list. You had
Gargano Almas, that was Meltzer's first 5-star in how many years?
Yep. And you had War Games. Just match after match, takeover after takeover. It's been great. Excuse me. They've been able to kind of attract new wrestlers from the independent scene. So we had Keith Lee debut, Matt Riddle, Ricochet. So once those other guys that are on the top right now kind of move up to the main roster, you'll still have those guys that will kind of fill those voids. So,
and it's amazing because with all that going on with Black, Gargano, Ciampa, and the really main event, Velveteen Dream, where he's going, you forget about the Undisputed Era sometimes and how they have worked this past year and their tag team with Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly and having their matches, their match with the Mustache Mountain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Numerous
I was
times.
there for that. Great match.
Adam Cole winning the first North American Championship in that ladder match.
Amazing match.
Very good match. Yeah. And we saw two guys debut on that card and that match with Ricochet and EC3. And EC3 is going to be called up to the main roster soon. I thought his time in NXT wasn't going to be that long anyway.
Yeah, he seems like more of a guy that's more fit for the main roster anyway, with his look and his persona.
Right. So it's like there are so many guys in NXT right now, and the way they're pushed and the way their storytelling is, it's like when you get called up to the main roster, instead of going, "Oh my God, I'm excited," you're going, "Oh no."
Yeah. That's one of the things we talked about, where as much as I want to see these guys called up like Ciampa and Gargano, it's almost to the point where I don't want to see them called up because, one, we're going to the NXT the Saturday or it's on a Friday this year.
Friday, yep.
The Friday before WrestleMania, so I want to be able to see those guys. Hopefully, that's the match where we see the blow off for Ciampa and Gargano. But I want to be able to still, watch what they're doing because it is so special, especially now. And if those guys get called up, unfortunately, you lose that. But everybody who's been involved in NXT this year, starting with Triple H, I mean, just an amazing job across the board.
Would you say the Ciampa Gargano story is the best piece of storytelling in wrestling history?
I think we have to see what happens. I think we have to see what happens with their careers. If they go on to have successful careers in the main roster, which I think for all intensive purposes, they certainly are able to do that. We'll look back on that and say, we'll understand how special NXT is or was to, WWE overall, which I think it will be. And I think a big part of that is going to be, attributed to this feud, which with people losing their attention span, it's getting shorter and shorter. You're not going to find many times where people will be fully invested in a feud that's going to span over a year. You saw it with Kenny Omega and Okada. They tried to do it with Brock and Roman. People kind of lost interest with that. Other than that, I mean, this is one of my favorite. This is probably my favorite feud going on in wrestling right now.
Definitely in wrestling right now. I mean, the only ones that you might compare to best storytelling, Okada Omega.
Definitely, yep.
Mega Powers, way back
if
when.
We're going back all time.
If we're talking about all time, the Mega Powers. And of course, the 4 years of Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah. Those are really it. And this, I think, goes in that conversation. Just the fact that they're finding new ways to find wrinkles in the story. And now that Ciampa and Gargano are they DIY again?
Yeah.
And it's like full circle and it leads to another split and a payoff. It's just great storytelling. And I don't know what writers are involved, if this is all Triple H, if there's guys down in NXT, but whoever is writing this needs to write on the main roster because that is much better than anything SmackDown or Raw has had in a long time.
Yep.
Long time. But let me do one last one here for the best of 2018, and it does involve Kenny Omega and the fact that he wins the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. That moment at Dominion, the chase with him and Okada, the matches that they had, just great matches. Meltzer breaking his star rating scale over it and keeps breaking it and breaking it and breaking it. And they saved the best for last, the 2 out of 3 falls match, which some people are considering the best match of the year. This has to be one of the best moments of 2018. Has to be.
Yeah. This is really where, Kenny Omega and Okada are essential in building New Japan. They were responsible for, along with Dave Meltzer, which we talked about last week, kind of drawing new eyes onto a different product. That's kind of where it started, I think. And without the matches, without their feud, you don't necessarily have that. So him winning that championship after I think that was that was the third match in a trilogy, being able to keep these guys apart but still make it feel fresh, like I said, talking about Ciampa and Gargano, that was special where they were able to kind of extend it out and still make people want to see it Great match, and Kenny Omega winning the championship, it certainly meant something for the wrestling industry.
Yes, and I know some people criticize his championship run right now, but just the moment there that he finally won it has got to be up there with him being the best moment of 2018. But to every good thing, there's a bad thing. So, Ralph, I'll let you start the worst moments of 2018.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the landscape of the Universal title. Initially, I was going to do both championships, but I don't think, mostly because of Daniel Bryan, I'm not really going to talk too much about SmackDown, but the Universal Championship specifically is one thing that was really frustrating for me because it essentially had Brock Lesnar carry the title for 504 days, beat everybody in a limited schedule. He wasn't showing up on Raw, which people were getting frustrated up with, criticizing him for, which we talk about all the time. And the thing that was most assumed was eventually Roman Reigns is going to be the guy to take the belt off Brock. Now, I've said multiple times I have no problem or issue with Roman Reigns being the champion because he brings something to the table that Cena brings to the table. He's a polarizing character where you're either going to cheer him or boo him. My main gripe was after carrying the belt for 504 days, Brock Lesnar dropping the belt to Roman Reigns was essentially what people always assumed was going to happen. I think that they could have gone a different route. I think they could have used that opportunity for Braun Strowman to beat him because it would have meant more having Strowman conquer Brock Lesnar after carrying the belt for so long. I think they squandered an opportunity to use his very long title reign. The longest, I think, in the modern era, they said it was longer than CM Punk's 450 some odd days. I could be wrong, but
unless you're counting Pete Dunne's current United Kingdom Championship.
Well, I'm just talking about the Universal Championship. Yeah. But so Brock essentially carrying the belt for as long as he did, I felt like they could have used that as an opportunity to build up a different star or use it as an opportunity to kind of promote somebody else. Having Roman win the title from Brock was always assumed that it was going to happen. I think people were frustrated with that. And then kind of what happened going forward from that point. So we know Roman, he's out battling leukemia, which they couldn't have predicted that. One of the things that they did do in an effort to kind of get Roman over from that point was repackage the Shield, turn Braun Strowman, who was probably the most over guy as a face at the time, heel, in an effort to give him somebody to feud with. And they tied up all of the titles, all of them. The Intercontinental Championship, the Tag Team Championship, the Universal Championship.
And wasted the Money in the Bank briefcase.
And the Money in the Bank. All of that was tied up in this one feud between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman and the Dogs of War and the Shield. And, you know, when you look at the lay of the land now, it's kind of like, okay, well, Brock's still the champion. By default, I guess, because they didn't really know who else to put the belt on.
Mm-hmm.
Braun Strowman, who was maybe your most over guy at the time, turned heel, lost some of his steam, then you turned him back face. You tied up all the belts, so it's kind of like all of this was kind of a wasted opportunity, and that would be my main gripe because it didn't really progress the industry. It didn't really progress a storyline to the point where people are now satisfied on a week-to-week basis.
Right. I will sort of piggyback off of that for one of my worst moments of 2018, and that is just the fact that Roman Reigns announcing that he has leukemia. I understand people's dislike for Roman Reigns, the character.
Mm-hmm.
But that night, October 22nd, where he comes out to start the show and announces he has leukemia, it's a moment that WWE will always remember.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, your top guy is now leaving because of unforeseen circumstances. And whether you liked Roman Reigns or not, before that announcement, that was a very sad moment.
Absolutely.
As a wrestling fan. Because you never want to see someone in that situation.
Right.
Ever. And seeing Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Dean Ambrose at the top of the ramp doing their Shield bump, and they're in tears, and you see fans in tears. It was just a very emotional night. In a sense, and you got these morons out there, these mouth-breathing basement dwellers that say this is their last chance of trying to get Roman Reigns over. Like, how insensitive they are to think that they're using leukemia to get Roman Reigns over. Like, he's not sick. He'll show up at the Royal Rumble, surprise entrant, win it, and everybody will have a feel-good moment. The fact that there's people out there thinking that is just unbelievably stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sad. And it also brings up the whole Universal Championship thing, because they finally put the belt on him. We're finally going to see the Universal title on the TV again, and Brock gets it back, and now, honestly, with the lack of Roman Reigns, we are seeing the ratings drop. Definitely. We are seeing the lack of the Universal Championship. Basically, for everyone saying that they did not need Roman Reigns, or he shoved down our throats, now you see this and he's gone. Now you miss him.
Yeah.
And it has to take something so drastic like this to finally realize how special Roman Reigns is.
Yeah. And I'm not saying he's the greatest wrestler of all time, but he certainly has his place and his importance for the WWE. Now, one of the things I know I talked to you about was going back and watching a segment between him and Cena. I think it was the contract signing prior to their match. I want people to go back and watch that. Go on YouTube, look it up, see the exchange between John Cena and Roman Reigns, and then come back to us and tell me if there's anybody on the Raw roster that is capable of doing what those two did. Because I don't think there is. And I think that's in large part due to that's in large part of why the show is not as good as it is right now, because you need people to be emotionally invested in the characters. They need to be able to deliver compelling promos. Go back and watch that. I don't think there's a single person on the Raw roster, anybody that's currently on the roster that can do what those two did that night.
No, not at all. So
that's why the product is suffering.
Right. Let's move on to another worst here, and it kind of relates in a way, and that is the whole controversy behind Crown Jewel.
Mm-hmm.
This, before, during, and after Crown Jewel, is just horrible. Absolutely horrible. The fact that they're going there, and with everything happening with Jamal Khashoggi, and we actually did an episode just strictly on whether or not they should still have the pay-per-view, despite what happened with Jamal Khashoggi. They still do it. The fact that people know they did it strictly on a business reason.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have, during the show, you have Braun Strowman lose to Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship, where a lot of people thought he was buried. He wasn't. Shut up. And also the fact that Shane McMahon won the World Cup.
Yeah.
It's all bad. All bad.
Yeah.
All bad. I don't think we need to talk too much about it, but just leaving that out there.
That was really the kind of the turning point where I think people stopped watching. I think that's where the dip in the ratings started for Monday Night Raw, and after that show. But yeah, just like you said, there wasn't a whole lot of good things that kind of came out of that. It wasn't a very good show. You saw Brock Lesnar win the title back in a fluky way. Baron Corbin's all over the product, as he still kind of is. So yeah, not a good show. Not a highlight of 2018.
Quickly, one last thing for you. What worst of 2018?
Treatment of NXT stars. So they called up a number of guys. When you kind of look at some of the more prominent roles on WWE Network, WWE product, it certainly feels like they've called up a bunch of guys and they're not necessarily utilizing them. I'm not blaming the WWE for this. I'm just kind of pointing it out. You called up Cien Almas. He's essentially not really on the show. Sanity, to this point, has essentially been wasted. We saw them on SmackDown last week. We'll see if they do anything with the group going forward. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, 2018 was not very kind to them. Nakamura's been kind of a mixed bag. He's been in the championship picture. He was the U.S. champion. We know that he dropped the belt to Rusev. Rusev was extremely over with Rusev Day, and then they just kind of stopped pushing that for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's just kind of unfortunate because you see these guys in NXT do some really special things, get extremely over, and then once they get promoted to the main roster, they don't really do too much.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you on all that stuff there. But I want to quickly go to our tweets here that we got at SCPB Podcast. First, Villainous Havoc saying Crown Jewel by a long shot as her most hated. We already talked about that already. At SSJ4 Vegeta 1986, her best moment, was Becky attacking Ronda, and the worst, Nia breaking Becky's face. Definitely one of the worst. So the same moment being the best and the worst. So go to show you there. At Brandon Ewing says the best, the entire TakeOver War Games 2 event. One of the rare times I enjoyed a top show from top to bottom, and the worst is the mixed match challenge. Can we just get rid of this show? Horrible.
How about the fact that they barely promoted that once you make the once you win that, you're the 30th entrant?
Yeah.
They barely promoted
Well, they
that.
kind of threw it like last minute, and then the fact that everyone that was in the mixed match challenge already had matches at TLC. You already assumed that it was going to be either Jinder or Alicia or R-Truth and Carmella. So at Omega Luke saying the man Andrade Cien Almas being featured, although little bit, were his best, and the worst got to be the booking decisions between WrestleMania and SummerSlam. And just want to point out there another worst moment. Dolph Ziggler versus Seth Rollins to the Iron Man match at Extreme Rules, where the crowd hijacked for literally no reason, ruining that entire match. Hated that. Still hate it. Always will hate it. And that's going to do it. So if you have any more, make sure you tweet us at SCPB Podcast using the hashtag @WrestlingWithTwitter. Comment below. What do you think were your best and worst moments of 2018? And of course, follow us on Twitter at SCPB Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube as we're trying to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers before the Royal Rumble. And subscribe and review so more people listen to the Squared Circle Psychobabble on your favorite podcast provider. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble.